Welcome to another episode of Rooted in Reaching, a podcast about startups and entrepreneurs in the South Bend Elkhart region of Indiana. My name is Bethany Hartley.
And I'm Nick Kuhns. Today, I'll be speaking with Nate Miller with Consensus Networks, and we'll learn about his journey to make cryptocurrency and blockchain wallets less complicated and cumbersome. We hope you enjoy. Nate, thanks for being here today. It's great to have you on the podcast.
Awesome. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so I wanted to just get started, diving back a little bit in the history, how you got involved in the crypto space. Way before that, you were in the Navy, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I'm originally from Michigan. Grew up in Big Rapids, so Fair State University for those who don't know. But I got an appointment to the Naval Academy. I went to the Naval Academy for my college experience. From there, I went into the nuclear Navy pipeline, did submarine training, ended up out in Washington State, and I was there for a number of years operating submarines and the nuclear reactors there. So that was like a totally crazy experience. And then my final tour of duty was actually here in South Bend at University of Notre Dame, teaching at ROTC. And yeah, so that's what brought me here. I was interested in what's next. I was getting out of the Navy. And I was thinking, what am I going to do? What am I going to do next? And so I talked to a mentor of mine, and he recommended this program at Notre Dame called ESTEEM. And it's a cool program that immerses you in entrepreneurship. And I guess you could say, caught the bug. I don't really think of myself as an entrepreneur. It's not really like something I call myself. I don't put it in my Twitter profile, But yeah, I caught the bug and decided, hey, this is cool. ESTEEM allowed you to like participate in a startup. So Consensus Networks was my startup for the ESTEEM program, and I finished that master's program at Notre Dame and decided, hey, I think there's some stuff here. I want to roll with it, and it's been nice. That's the story.
I'm consistently impressed by the ESTEEM students. It's a great program. Come from around the world, Africa, Europe, Asia, and it's almost a little bit of a cohort model that works through a single year for a grad program, really based on entrepreneurship. Like what can you get started? How do you develop the innovative mindset? Sounds like it worked for you.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, it was awesome.
Did you make some good friends?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I actually just last week talked to a buddy of mine from ESTEEM. He's in Rwanda. Actually, he's in Kenya now. He's doing a startup. So it's so cool. It's so cool to like to go through a program with somebody and then years later talk to them, and they're still doing the entrepreneurship. They're still in the startup space. They're in Africa, doing startups in Africa. It's really cool to be able to have conversations like that and think about how that works and talk to people like that. Yeah.
What a great example of how to leverage a tier 1 university and how they can think differently about education. I want to double back a little bit on the academy. Those aren't easy to get into. Yeah. They're extremely challenging, and they're extremely challenging to stay, to be a part of for a long period of time. A lot of people don't go in there as with a military background necessarily.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about your experience at the Naval Academy?
Yeah. So I do have kind of a little bit of a lineage there. My dad actually went to the Naval Academy. My grandfather was a retired Navy captain and served during World War II. And my grandpa really got me into the Naval Academy. Or he didn't get me in. He really encouraged me to go, encouraged me to apply. He got me the application and said, go ahead and apply. And so I did, and I was fortunate enough to get in. You do have to go through a number of interviews. You have to get a recommendation from either your representative, your congressional representative, or a senator. I was able to get that, and so there is a process, and then the Naval Academy itself is tough. It's a very it's a structured environment, but it's also very fast paced, competitive time, and it's tough. It's tough to do. I sometimes look back and think, man, like how did I do that? Because it is really tough. I think I've taken a lot of those lessons though, and applied them to entrepreneurship though. Really fighting through challenges, trying to think outside the box. I think a lot of people think of the military as very linear in thinking and very non-creative. And I think that can be true for sure. But one of the things that I discovered about myself when I was in the military is that I was able to do really well in the military by thinking outside of the box just enough, and trying to do things just a little bit different than other people were doing, within the guidelines and procedures that I had to for operating a submarine or doing other duties that I had. But it was enough that I was able to kind of achieve kind of a little bit higher level and do well and do well when it came to my performance reviews and things like that. And so I've tried to take those lessons to entrepreneurship where you want to have structure within your company, and you want to have, it's tough in a startup because there's just a few people. A lot of people have a lot of different responsibilities, so you can't have this like really formal structured bureaucracy in your startup, because a lot of people got to do a lot of different things. You got to move fast, you got to break things right. And so I've tried to have a little bit of structure, enough structure where, hey, we're following up on things. We've got structured time where we have feedback sessions, and we're really taking a look, and we have processes for how we do things. But on the same side, I try to also keep things open and loose, allow people to create, allow for innovation to happen. And so I some of that did come from my time in the military, actually, where you did need to have a little bit of creativity and allow that to flow, even though you were constrained by kind of the bureaucracy of things. So
it's a fantastic way to describe it. I think the entrepreneurial mindset may be thought of from a lot of different perspectives as the Wild West, or you're a cowboy, or you're on a speedboat. Like you can just do whatever you want and figure it out and go. But it's not. It's still a business. You still have blocking and tackling. You still have process and form and structure. But you do need to go quickly.
Yeah.
And so that's a fascinating way to tie in what, like you said, a more structured, rigid model with how do you innovate alongside of that.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So let's fast forward a little bit to you're out of ESTEEM. You did a capstone project called Consensus Networks. Tell us what that is.
Yeah. So I was getting into crypto while I had actually, before I even started ESTEEM, I was kind of curious. I was listening to the radio, and they were talking about a Bitcoin ETF. And this was like 2016, and I was kind of like, oh yeah, I think I heard of Bitcoin maybe, and so I got into it, started to really immerse myself in the technology and what was going on in the space, and so I was really excited to do the project.
Let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
You're not a coder by.
I'm not a coder. No,
okay.
I'm not a coder. I'm an engineer, but I'm not a coder. I do stuff in the command line. I use Linux. I'm conversant, but I'm not a coder by any means. Though I kind of get it, I guess.
But you saw the broader picture.
I saw the bigger picture of it, and I can talk about that too from the bigger picture. But I got really interested in this idea of like digital money, and digital assets and what that could be, and so I really wanted to do something with that, and ESTEEM allowed me to jump in and create a company around digital assets. And so when we first started, I guess I would say one of the things that I knew, I didn't know everything about the space. I didn't know very much about the space at all because we were just getting started. But one of the things that I knew was that there had to be servers that operated these networks. These are networks, these blockchain networks are these decentralized networks that operate around the globe that send money, or send digital assets, sends an NFT or piece of information or Bitcoin to another node anywhere in the globe, and it happens 24/7, 365. There's no downtime to these networks, hardly ever. And so one thing I knew is that there had to be servers that powered these networks and processed these transactions, and they had to be distributed around the globe. And they probably couldn't be on AWS, right? Because then everything's just in one building, right? They had to be decentralized and outside of like the normal internet cloud. And so that's where I started was, all right, let's start building servers that can be a part of these networks and process transactions. And so that was great. That was the right thing to do, I think, from the company's perspective. And so what we started doing was we started to participate in what we call the consensus mechanism of these networks, where we're processing the transactions, we're validating the transactions, and we're allowing the network to work. And along the way, we discovered that, hey, this is really hard. It's really hard to do that. And if you want to use these networks, like we're using them to validate transactions or to look at transactions, to get beside, outside of the crypto trading that happens on Coinbase and kind of the speculative hype, if you want to use it for anything else other than trading tokens, it's really, really hard to do. It's hard for us to do it, so it's got to be even harder for everybody else. So if this technology is going to become the next internet, or it's going to become the next big thing, we've got to do some more work here. And so that really launched kind of the next phase of what we are doing, which is building applications on top of our service, on top of our networks, that'll make it easier for users to interact with digital assets, to use digital assets, and facilitate what we think is the next phase of adoption from just the speculative trading and the hype cycles and the scams and all of that stuff to actual usability and what we think is Web3, the next level of the internet.
Could I ask a few questions? I want to do what a colleague of mine said, pitch a 12-year-old. So there's some jargon with Web3 that may be a little bit challenging for me. Let's just call it for me. Yeah. So let's start at the base level. I'm just going to do some rapid fire terms. If you could give me like a succinct answer or definition. A server. What's the difference between a server and a computer?
Yeah, I mean, they can almost be the same thing, basically. A server is a computer, but generally the server is dedicated to one thing, which is serving up an application to the internet so people can use it.
Good. Yeah. Got it. And then consensus. Obviously, when people have consensus, they agree on something. Is that similar?
It is really similar. One of the ideas behind Bitcoin was, and it's really this big kind of question is like, how do you decide what truth is or what a state is? And it's a really tough problem to decide. So normally, right, there's a company that just decides. You say like, this is the database, or this is the ledger, this is the answer, and that's Google or that's AWS, and they just say this is what the answer is. But if you want to do that in a decentralized way, if you want to do that where there's not a single company that controls it and says what the answer is, you got to figure out how to do that. How does somebody in Africa agree with somebody in America, agree with somebody in Europe about the state of a network, or what a transaction is, or how much money you have, if there's not a bank that's doing that or a single person. So that's what consensus is. It's a way of solving that problem.
Cool. And then one of my other ones was decentralized, but you just kind of nailed it. It means not one entity is a source of truth. It's literally across a spectrum and band of entities. Let's see, what other... we're going to cut this, Michael. That's for sure. My stumbling block. Let's talk about Web3. Can you define Web3 and maybe the previous iterations of the web prior to 3?
Yeah. And I'll just say this. There are so many terms in this space, and it is a problem. It is a problem. And I also appreciate, one of the things I learned when I was in the Navy was that you should be able to explain anything to a 5-year-old, right? And I can explain how nuclear power works to my 5-year-old. And I think that serves you well, right? If you can't understand it, it doesn't mean you're stupid. It means a lot of times it means somebody is like kind of maybe they're BSing you. So again, if you can't understand it, tell them to explain it to you like they're 5, like you're 5. And if they can't, I think there's a good chance that there's a little bit of scammy going on there. But so Web3, and you'll hear me use these terms all interchangeably. So Web3, often synonymous with blockchain, often synonymous with digital ledger or Bitcoin. And a lot of times we're talking all about the same thing, but Web3 is this idea of digital ownership of the internet. So I think one way you can think about it is so much of our lives are online. So much of our information is online. There's so much value that we're digitizing today and we're creating today. So it only makes sense that there's a way to capture this digital value. And there is a way. And there's a few companies that make a ton of money off of you and your information that you freely provide to them. And you don't have any recourse on that. You don't get any share of those profits. You don't make any of that money. You don't really even have control of your information at all. And so Web3 and blockchain was partially born out of this frustration with, hey, there's just a few people that control all of this information. They have all of this power. There's got to be a way we can return digital value and the ability to control your path to the individual. And so that's really where Web3 came from. And so that's really how I think of Web3. If you want to say like Web1 was really kind of the early internet, where we're talking DARPANet, really basic kind of emailing, that very early stage. Web2 is kind of what we have today, where we've got these, web applications. You can go online, use Facebook, use TikTok, use Twitter. These are all web applications. Web3 is that, but really with this data provenance, where you can start to own your data. You can transact digital value. You can send money to people natively, and you don't need a third party controlling that to do that.
Got it. That's helpful. Thank you. Okay, so let's translate all of that into the current state of Consensus Networks. It's launching a new product that I'm excited about, because when I coach entrepreneurs, I talk about clarity, pitching to a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
Bring this down to my level. You may be a master of your domain, but that doesn't mean I understand it. So tell me about what the product is at Consensus and what it does.
Yeah, for sure. So I think I mentioned already, hey, how hard it is to use and interact with digital assets. And so that really drove this product development of, all right, let's create a user experience that's intuitive and easy to use and allows people to actually interact with digital assets, interact with these networks that we support and we work with, and does it really easily for the user. So you've got to start someplace, though. We're not quite there in adoption yet, where everything is a digital asset. Your electronic health record may one day be a digital asset. Your other pieces of information, your house title may be a digital asset, but we're not there yet. And so where we started today was with staking. So people in the Web3 space are familiar with this, and maybe you're not. If you don't know anything about crypto, you've probably heard of Bitcoin. You've probably heard of Ethereum. And one of the things that Ethereum just did is they switched their consensus model from proof of work to proof of stake. And so they changed the way they decide what truth is for their network. Proof of stake is a little bit more energy efficient way of doing it. And how proof of stake works is it allows anybody that holds Ethereum to what's called stake their Ethereum to a server. You can stake it, and basically it kind of works like a deposit. And for that deposit, you get a percentage back. You get an interest rate on that. You get a dividend, basically. And so it's really hard to do, though. So today, if you want to stake your Ethereum, your options are kind of to use Coinbase. And one of the big problems with that is that's bringing in this third party again. So in the world where we're talking about, hey, Web3 is, hey, get rid of the third parties that control everything. Today, it's, there's new third parties coming in, and so Coinbase is there. And they take a big cut out of your Ethereum that you deposit, and you can earn rewards on. And so what we've developed is a way for users to stake their Ethereum without having to go through a third party. What we facilitate the user to easily connect into the Ethereum network natively, and then they can stake their Ethereum, earn rewards on that without ever having to give up control of those Ethereum tokens to a company like Coinbase to do that. That's kind of step one. And then we were looking to expand that to a lot of other networks, to a lot of other use cases, again, beyond just staking, beyond just Ethereum.
So my 12-year-old version of this is I put money in my bank. It says, I'll give you 4% if you let it sit here.
Yeah.
They lend it to someone else at 7%. You're cutting that out. So it allows me direct accessibility to that person, that entity, for 7%. Now I can gain more interest.
That's right.
By having a direct connection.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. And yeah, that's exactly right. The only thing I'll just say is, you're not lending it out. You always have control of that money. Yep. But yeah, I think that's a great analogy. We're cutting out that middleman that's taking their percentage.
Yeah.
And we're allowing you to directly to stake, and just make a higher percentage rate.
Where do you, last question, where do you see the Web3 space going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's two big things that are happening right now that are going to be impactful to people. The first that's going to directly impact probably everybody that's listening to this is central bank digital currency. So everybody the federal government is going to implement, most likely, I think, within the next 5 to 10 years, central bank digital currency that is going to digitize the United States dollar. And so whether you like it or not, you're going to be in the world of digital currencies. Everybody will be, I think. I think that's going to change a lot of things. And that's another podcast. That's another hour discussion about what that does. I think the second thing that's going to be interesting that's currently happening is the digitization of more assets. So the digitization of things like property titles. I think people are really looking at the digitization of things that are very close already, like stocks, bonds, other equities like that. So I think the other big change that we're going to see is that digitization of real world assets. That is really going to start happening and picking up speed. And so that is also going to be really interesting the next time you buy a house in 5 or 10 years, how the closing process works, because it could be all digital. It could be this digital system allows the actual closing process to happen maybe much faster. You're going to have less paperwork. It's going to be this new process. It'll be interesting to see how that.
And of
that
course,
works.
more secure on this decentralized network. Nate, this is great. How can people find you?
Yeah, so you can go to consensusnetworks.com. That's our main homepage. We're just launching V1 of Casimir, our digital asset management platform. And it's not quite launched yet. It's in the next week or two we'll be launching.
All right.
But you can, if you look around our website, you can find a couple of ways to get to a sneak peek of it. So
awesome. Well, Nate, thanks for being here today and then going through your journey, the Web3 journey. Really, you've accomplished quite a few things. I appreciate getting to know you and the hard work you're doing here at South Bend.
For sure. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Take care.